Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum students, and a very good morning to all of you. Today we are here for another lecture on TEFL, and remember, what were we talking about? Yes, we were talking about methods. Methods of what? Methods of foreign language teaching. Remember that? So initially, in fact, if I just give you a review, a brief review of the lecture so far that we had, we started with TEFL. What is TEFL? What does TEFL stand for? We talked about scope of TEFL, and then we moved on to methods of TEFL. And the first method we talked about, the oldest method, that is grammar translation method. Remember that? Fine. And then we started another method, important one, a good one method. We call it direct method. Good. What do we call it? I wanted to see whether you remember or not. Yes, so you remember the second method was direct method, right? And again, we had a detailed discussion on that method. Why? Because direct method, what does it do, by the way? Do you remember? Okay, yes, the direct method, of course, we learn this language and we teach this language, of course, directly in the target language. Fine? So we had a discussion on that, and in the last lecture we also saw some differences between direct method and grammar translation method. So today, in fact, we are going to start another method, that is audio-lingual method. Students, remember that? So I hope you're ready for it. Yes? How is weather today, students? Before I start, I want to know something. How is weather today? Is it sunny outside? No? Right? Is it raining outside? No? Is it cloudy outside? No? How is it? Is it foggy? Is it misty? Yes? Oh, yes, it's pleasant. Pleasant morning? Which morning? Spring morning? No? Winter morning? Autumn morning? Summer morning? Oh yes, see, of course, we are lucky students that we are blessed with four weathers, right? Which four weathers? Yeah? See, summer, okay, one, fine, winter, what else? Spring. See, so spring, then summer, then what else? Autumn and winter, right? So we are fortunate, we Pakistanis, we are fortunate that we are blessed with four weathers. We enjoy all these four weathers, fine. And again, being a language teacher, we need to know all these things because you can design activities accordingly, fine. So the weather is cold, and accordingly we are dressed. For example, you wear sweater, you wear coat, and the weather is hot outside. So what do? Yeah, you wear dress accordingly, in fact. So see the weather, and then we make our plan. Even for a day in summer, days are long, right? You have plenty to do. You can do a lot in summer days, but in winter you have long nights. Fine, the days are short in winter, but nights are long. And again, right, if you want to put efforts, so winter nights are the best time. Fine. Even you can sleep early and you get up at 2 a.m. in the winter nights and you can work to 4 hours. Fine. In the morning you can work. Fine. Similarly, in summer days, right, you have long days and you can work hard. You can get up early in the morning. Fine. In summer, of course, you can start working after your Fajr prayers, and you can go on till Maghrib. Fine. So it's a very long day, right? So that's, of course, talking about the weather. And of course, what is your favorite? If I ask you a question, what is your favorite weather? Which weather you like the most? Spring? Oh yes, majority says spring. Why do you like spring, by the way, students? Yeah, the spring is not cold, not hot, fine, weather is temperate. Yeah, there are flowers, the blossoming season, of course. So yes, of course, we all, right, because that is a temperate. Yeah, some people, they like summer as well, and there are some people who want to enjoy, I mean, the winters, the long nights are there, you sleep a lot, right? So that's what. Fine, students. Come back to lecture number 6. No, lecture number 7. But before we start this lecture, what will we do? What is the practice? Practice is to review, right? To see the lecture. Which lecture? The previous one. So that you could do what? You could link. You could pick up the thread. Fine? You could link this lecture with the previous one. Of course, we are moving, right? Of course, we are following a sequence. Sequentially, we are moving. So we talked about GTM, and then we discussed direct method, where we saw that language is learned, a language is taught directly in the target language. Fine? And then, of course, we discussed various differences. So let's start with today's lecture. So today, my dear students, here let's review, have a look on the previous lecture, that was lecture number 6. So dear students, we saw certain differences. Who would tell me differences? Okay, yes, grammar, right? How? Teachers teach grammar in grammar translation method. Yes, why are you always, I mean, we all people focus on grammar? Yeah, because again, I would say that because that we have been part of this grammar translation method. So whenever we want to learn a language, so this element of language, of course, comes to our mind, and majority talks about it. That grammar is an important part. So dear student, that's why, of course, you started with the grammar. Well, we saw in the last lecture that grammar is taught how? In direct method? Inductively. Fine? And then how grammar is taught in GTM? Deductively. Fine? So deductive method of teaching and inductive method of teaching. Yes, students? Clear? Good. Good. So who would tell me what is the difference between a deductive method of grammar teaching and inductive method of grammar teaching? Yes? Who would try? Try it. Good. Deductive method talks about what? Explicit rules are given. Fine. Explicit grammar teaching. What is explicit, by the way? You know, things are explicit, things are clear. So in grammar translation method, the teacher gives students rules, right? And then teacher asks student to use those rules, right? So this is what? Deductive method of grammar teaching. Whereas what happens in direct method, students? Yes, Mustafa, could you try? Yes, all right. Alina, can you? Uzma, think of inductive method. You remember? Okay, what happens in inductive method, students? Try it. Fine. What does the teacher do in this method? The teacher gives what? Different sentences. Fine. Words? No. Teacher gives what? Different sentences, students. Fine. And then what happens? Alright. So, teacher gives a lot of sentences, and then he asks students to infer rules. Right? So, that's the way. This is what we call it inductive method. For example, if the teacher gives you, for example, 25 sentences of 25 passive sentences, right? Or he gives active sentences, fine? So then, I mean, active sentences are given, and then again the passive sentences are given. So then the teacher asks you to find out, to infer the rule from that. So once you read those sentences, fine, you may read 20 sentences or 25 sentences, it's up to you. So, you see, the more you read, definitely, the more you will get. And again, while designing activities for inductive method of teaching, the teacher tries to, here, teacher has to be active. He has to, find sentences out from various situations, so that once the students have to infer rules, they could do it easily. Fine, students. All right. This was one. Another difference was, the flaw was, what was that? You see? Yes, that well, of course, the focus of GTM was reading and writing. What did we call these two skills? Remember that? Yes, literacy skills. Fine? Yeah, because we have to learn reading. And now, of course, we have to learn writing as well. So, what do you call them? Literacy skills. So, GTM focuses on these two skills, whereas language, of course, how many skills are there? 4 skills. So again, we see on the other side, direct method does what? Yeah, direct method, my dear students, focuses on 4 skills, right? Listening is there, reading is there, writing is there, and speaking is there. Again, I would say focuses on both input, right, and output skills. What are input skills now? Yeah, input are what? Yeah, listening skills and input skill. Fine. Again, reading is again input skill. Of course, the output means productive skills. Fine. Production. You see, so how do you produce? For example, you speak, and then what else you do? You write. And again, I told you students that, well, good listeners are good speakers, good, and then good readers are good writers. So of course these 4 skills are important, and direct method, my dear students, focuses on these 4 methods, 4 skills, because if you want to be a good learner of a language, you have to speak that language, like with your L1, the language 1, in fact, whatever your L1 is, what we do? So again, you read that language, right? Again, you speak that language, of course, and you listen that, you write that, of course. So all 4 skills are there. So is the case. Of course, the direct method, in fact, stresses on that the user should be able to use that target language. So since he has to use that language, so, that we being TEFL teachers, we have to teach that language accordingly. Fine. So that's why in the direct method, the name is given direct method. Directly, of course, we teach that language in the target language. The target language is the language that we are learning. So again, the grammar way, the method of grammar teaching is different. Again, the focus, fine, that of course the grammar translation method, focuses on reading and writing and ignores what? Speaking and listening. Whereas direct method, incorporates all the 4 skills. Is that clear? And again, the goals of teacher, of grammar translation method, and what? The direct method. Is that clear? In direct method, what happens? Interaction between the student is more. Fine, students interact. Fine, and they can interact with the teacher, they can interact with one another. Right? So, but in GTM, we didn't see that. What did we see in GTM? We saw that, well, only the student teacher, they interact. There was no interaction. Why? Again, you could answer that, well, it is not the purpose of GTM. Whereas in direct method, we saw plenty of interaction. Again, in indirect method, we saw the teacher demonstrates things. Fine. So the demonstration is there. Teacher points. And again, teacher uses body language, clear, to make things, to make the learning meaningful, in fact. So whereas in direct method, of course, grammar translation method, these things are not observed there. So, and again, evaluation method in direct method is what? Your oral examinations are there, your written examinations are there. So what are oral examinations? Interviews are there, conversations are there, group discussion is there, public speaking is there. Fine. So, and then in written work, sentence formation is there. So these are different ways that of course in direct method teachers adopt to evaluate the students. Whereas in grammar translation method, we saw the students that, well, what happens? Yeah, over there means just since the focus is on writing skills, so definitely the evaluation is also based on the writing. So this is again another difference. We saw that in grammar translation method, the passage that the teacher, of course, use, they take it from any literary source. A literary passage is taken, like we saw the Mark Twain story was taken. You can take a passage from Animal Farm, you can take a passage from Charles Lamb essay, you can take excerpt from any source, literary source. You can take a passage from Macbeth or Hamlet by Shakespeare. So yeah, but that literary, but here on the other side we saw that it's open, choice is yours. You can take passage from history, from geography, from sociology, from linguistics, right? So from a real life situation, or if you feel, yeah, because I told you that we teachers should be creative. You can write a dialogue for the students, and I think this is a very good approach, that if you follow it, and if you, considering your circumstances, considering your environment, if you put yourself in writing and you write a dialogue for the students, and that dialogue would really work. Because if you see outside, there is chaos, there is unfortunately instability, or there is curfew, unfortunately. So what happens? You can write a dialogue accordingly. Fine. And if you exploit that dialogue in the class, so that would really work. Because students, I mean, they have an idea about the prevailing situations, and they would really enjoy that dialogue. Or if there is occasion of Eid or the Christmas or any other, activities there in the country, and if you write a dialogue accordingly, that would really help you. Well, students, so I was talking about that in direct method, we can pick passage from any source, and I told you that if you are capable enough to write a dialogue, so you can use that. Or again, the newspaper is the best source. You can take excerpt from a newspaper. If you are, again, considering your students, if you are, for example, your students are business students, so you can take a passage from the business environment. So the passage can be taken from any source. And I personally prefer that if you write a dialogue, write an article, write a paragraph to be exploited, so that would be a real activity that would work. Because if you take, definitely when you write a passage, you would write about the current issue, the burning issue. So that issue student would have exploited well in the class. They would be able to understand, and they would be able to comment on that. So ultimately your purpose would be served. So this was in fact a short review of, what do we call it? Yeah. See, with review of the last lecture, that differences between direct and grammar translation method. Well, students, so today our method is, the next method, that is the audio-lingual method. And this method is abbreviated as ALM. Fine. You might be thinking, what is audio? Yeah, auditory. Fine. Listen. Clear? Lingual. This word lingual is related with speech. And method, you know, of course, the method comprises of your principles and techniques. So again, this is a method for, in fact, for what? For teaching a foreign language, right? And the method is, the name is audio-lingual method, and even the name shows that speech is there, fine, and of course auditory, right? And again we also call it the oral method. Let's see, in fact, of course, what is the details of this method. So again, students, first one is, it's an oral-based approach. Which approach? Oral-based approach, right? More oral practices are there. Oral, and you will see once you will enter the class, you will see there are lots of drills are there in the class, right? So lots of drills are there. Repetition is there. In fact, dialogues are there. So you will see that, well, students practice a lot. and once they practice a lot, what happens? Yeah, this becomes their habit. So this is again in audio-lingual method, we teach the language in such a way that it becomes habit of the student. Fine. So this is the method. We call it oral based approach, where stress is on oral skills. Fine. And then what happens? This method drills students in the use of grammatical sentence patterns. Lots of drills are given, right? Again, how? Through drills, grammatical patterns are taught, for example. And then again, how? This method, in fact, is based on behavioral psychology. So what is behavioral psychology, by the way? The name is what? Skinner is there. So again, for the language learning, my dear students, there are different schools of thought. One school of thought, this says that language learning is what? It's based on your drills. The more you drill, the better you learn. Well, students, so I was talking about that, yes, behavioral psychologist Skinner, of course, that language is learned through drills. The more you drills, the better you learn, in fact. And there is another school of thought, we call them, see, cognitivists, in fact. So they talk about that language is learned, language is a thought process. You think and then you learn language. So we will see these, theories later on, particularly cognitives. But here you need to remember that, well, the Skinner is of the view that, if you want to learn a language, or if you see the being teachers, when you teach a language, we need to give what? Lots of drills to the students. Fine. And again, of course, if you want to know a bit history about this audio-lingual method, again in World War II, when America, in fact, America needed people who would be good at, who would have native-like proficiency in European languages. Fine. And for this purpose, in fact, America, in fact, funded universities to have a method so that, you see, people would have native-like proficiency in the languages, the German, English, or different languages are there. So they required, fine, the purpose was this, mean native-like proficiency. And even for this, some linguists were also working then. Leonard Bloomfield was there. They also worked on this approach, that how can we have a method that would help students, right, help students in learning that language, and particularly they would have what? Proficiency, native-like proficiency. And again, the purpose was, the motive was, so that people, would go abroad, they would be, yes, they would be spying, or for various purposes, right, people needed, and for that they have to have a native-like proficiency. All right. So ASTP, what is it? Army Specialized. What? Techniques for proficiency. So definitely, one America funded universities so that people, they would be, so that researchers would work on a method of foreign language teaching where the learners would have proficiency and so that they would be able to speak like native speakers. So this is what happened in World War II, in fact. So that was again historical background, and because it was the time when, you see, these people, in fact, for military, the purpose is that the language was required, and this method, of course, if you want to know the history, so it goes back to World War II again. So come back, what is it? Again, I talk about behavioral psychology, and then conditioning. What is it? Helping learner to respond correctly to stimuli through shaping and reinforcement. Yes, this is what. Where are you? I'm in a class, right? Where are you? I'm in a class. Where are you? I'm in a playground. See, so you stimulate something and then immediate reply come, right? Where are you? You show a picture. I'm in a mosque. Where are you? You show a church. I'm in a church, for example, right? So this is what conditioning is there. In fact, you condition. Example, you see, you show something, and you, for example, you give what? A book to the student. Every day, for example, you promise the student that I'll give you a book, for example. And for first 5 days, 10 days, whenever he comes, you give him a book, for example. Now, 11th day, I mean, definitely he would come, and you may not have a book, in fact. So what happened? You have conditioned that student, and he will come. Or you ring the bell, for example. Right? There is of course, dog. And once you ring a bell and you give him, for example, meat. So 20 times you do it, and you reinforce, you give him the meat. 21st time, again you would ring the bell and dog would be there. But this time you may not have meat. So the dog has conditioned itself with that bell. So this is what, of course, when conditioning is there. And that's what in audio-lingual method, in fact, helps learner to what? To respond to what? To that correctly to stimuli through what? Shaping and reinforcement. And reinforcement means that, of course, if the student does well, yes, you appreciate the student. And again, audio-lingual method, yes, tries to develop this habit of the student. So habit formation is there, right? And how? Again, through various drills, practices, that the students, in fact, for example, you need not to, for example, when you ask for the daily routine of the student, so student, it becomes their habit to tell their daily routine in present simple tense, for example. I hope you understand. Clear? So this is what on the audio-lingual method is there. And then, what are your views, by the way? Right? Any views about this? I mean, lots of practice is there. Good. Drills are there. Fine. And this method linked with, yes, your auditory, your oral. I mean, again, oral. You listen a lot. Yes, audio cassettes are there. Fine. And then you improve your speech. And of course, you practice a lot so that what happens? That of course, language learning becomes your habit. So this is, of course, your views are there. Right. So what happens? In your text, see, once we enter the class, where is this class, by the way? It is in the Mali. Fine. Republic of Mali, of course, students. So I hope your text is with you. Yeah. So dear students, yes, that this is the class Republic of Mali. And you will see what happens in the class. And I hope you know how many students are there in the class. Yeah, how many students have see your text? There are, well, 34 students are there. And how many times they meet? 5 times. You find 4 hours a day, and then 5 days a week. So and then what is the age group? 15 to 17 years. All right. This is what we enter the class. And what now? Let's see what happens in the class. A dialogue from the text. What is it? See, Sally and Bill. They are 2 students. Fine. And again, the dialogue is, of course, the teacher has a dialogue. Fine. And dialogue, of course, has been selected from that particular context, of course. Fine. So there is a dialogue between Sally and Bill, and dialogue is there. Sally says good morning, and see, good morning Bill, good morning Sally. See, like we say assalamu alaikum. Fine. In our culture, assalamu alaikum, and we say wa alaikum assalam, for example. And then, how are you? Or sometimes people say, how do you do? You know, when do we say how do you do? Anybody? Okay, I might have told you earlier. Well, it is said that when you introduce, of course, when you meet somebody for the first time, so we say, how do you do? Right? So the first encounter, the first meeting, how do you do? And reply would be, how do you do? And then you introduce yourself. Clear? So first meeting is how do you do, but once you know a person, right, then you can use how are you. So here we see in this dialogue, because it's a class going on, so they use expression how are you, and they reply fine, thank you, right? And then where are you going? Going to the post office. See, where are you going? To the post office. I am too. Again, I am too. Shall we go together? Let's go. Clear? So it's a dialogue between Sally and Bill. Very simple. There is greeting. Fine. Morning. Morning. Right? How are you? Again. And then all that. So if you contextualize it in our culture, so for example, we say assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam. Right? Fine. How are you? Aap kaise hain? Main theek hoon. Right? So this is what we do. And then main bank ja raha hoon. I'm going to my office. I am too. हाँ मैं भी जा रहा हूँ. right? So sometime, see, we go together. So this is what means, shall we go together? Let's go. Fine. So it's a dialogue from the text. A dialogue is there again. I mean, see, this audio-lingual method, when we entered the class, I told you the details, and in the class we saw this dialogue. We'll have a discussion on this dialogue later on. Again here, you see there is a sentence, I am going to the post office, right? Going to. I am going to the post office. See what happens? So point is that in this audio-lingual method, what we do? We introduce a new dialogue. If you see on page 36, my dear students, you will see that. And then, all right, what the teacher does? Of course, there is what? Backward build-up drill. Backward build-up drill. You might be confused. What is it? Do you know it? Just see it. What is it? Backward build-up drill. Very simple. Backward. When teacher finds a student struggling, right? When he gives them drills and he finds that the students are struggling, students are unable to go with the complete sentence, what he does? He breaks and he goes back. For example, see in the sentence, I am going to the post office. What he does? He says first, post office. Then he says, the post office. Then he says, to the post office. Then he says, going to the post office. Then he says, I am going to the post office. Can you think of an example? Think of, right? Try. I'm going to a bank. Okay. So, bank. Fine. Bank. Then, to bank. Going. Right? I am going to a bank. Yeah? Another example. Good. I'm going to watch a match. Very good. A match. Right? Going. See? Then, fine. So, to going a match. So, then, watching. To going a match. I am going to watch a match. I hope you understand. So, this kind of example, you can do that. If I write for you students, have a look. See, I am going to, right? So, this backward drill is there. If you find that students are not comfortable with a long sentence, so you can simply break that sentence. Yes, no? Clear? Any confusion? No confusion? Alright. So, students, if we move on that, what the teacher does in the class, he uses repetition drill. The dialogue, of course, is given, and what happens in that dialogue, student? Yeah, initially what happens in choral, fine, the student in fact practice that dialogue, fine, and again, of course, before that, the teacher, what he does, that he, gives one role to one student, he becomes Bill, and the second, of course, acts as Sally. So what they do? They act on dialogue. Then again, all the students practice that dialogue orally. And what the next phase is, the teacher takes the role of Bill and the students take the role of Sally, for example. Clear? And again, sometimes the teacher changes the role and he takes, of course, he acts as Sally and the students act as Bill. Fine? And then again, the teacher does that, he divides the class into two halves. Half the class acts as Bill and the half the class acts as Sally. And again, right, that drill changes over. This part of the students again act as now Sally and the other part acts as Bill. So this is what, a lot of repetition is there in fact. Lots of repetition is there. So once they repeat things continuously for 6 times, 7 times, 8 times, so what happens? Yeah, that becomes their habit, of course. So there are a lot of repetition is there. And again, there is a chain drill. Fine? We will see in the activities that what happens in the chain drill. Simple, you know that well. A sentence, an expression passes on in a chain. Clear? The teacher passes a comment to a student, and then student passes it on. That student replies to a teacher, and then he passes on to another student, and then it goes on, right? It goes on to the last student, and the last student again passes that comment, communicates that comment to the teacher. So we call it chain drills there in this class. And again, what the teacher leads our single slot substitution drill. What is it? Simple. Replaces a word or a phrase, and the teacher gives cue, for example, CUE, shows picture, for example. So again, this is a technique in the class we saw where, what is it? What's going on? Substitution, but single slot substitution. Fine? Clear? So we will see it in the activities, but simple. At the moment, you need to remember that single slot substitution is one where one slot is left vacant, and the student, for example, fill in that. Well, students, so we're talking about what? That repetitions were there. There was a repetition drill, chain drill was also there, and then the teacher leads a single slot substitution. And again, what the teacher does, he praises the class during the practice. When a student does a good job, so teacher gives reinforcement. What he does? Well done, great job. So you see, this motivates the student. Whenever a student, does a good thing, so this is really important, because motivation prepares the student, and motivation makes the environment useful for learning. If environment is not useful, so learning would be tough. So that's why the ideal environment helps in the learning of a foreign language. That's why reinforcement is there in the class. So now another dialogue is there. How are you? Now here, subject verb agreement. See the grammar. SV agreement. And the question is, how are you? How are you? Right? How is he? How is she? How are they? See? See? So, see, sentence is, even the question is asked, how are you? How is your father? How is your mother? See? So, how is? How are you? Right? So, how is your father? How is your mother? How is your spouse? How is your sister? Fine? So, this is what means subject and then pronouns, he, she. Is that clear? How is he? How is she? He is fine. She is fine. So, a word that we use in place of noun. What do we call it? Pronoun. So, here mean again through a question. What happens that the teacher, of course, right, inculcates this subject verb agreement. How are they? Right? How are they? But how is he? How is she? Is that clear? How is Ali? How is Mustafa? Right? How are they? How are the students? Fine? So, lots of repetition is there. And then again, this verb be family, I hope you know that, is MR, right? In your GSS, you will have detailed discussion on these things. But at the moment, you need to know just that this is, we call it be family, and is, am, are the present forms of this be, was, were are the past form. And then, what else? See, being, B-E-I-N-G is the present participle form of the verb, be, and then what? Been, B-double-E-N, not Mr. Bean. Fine? So here is B-double-E-N, been. So this is what we call it past participle form. So how many? This is also we call it verb to be. Which verb? Verb to be. And these are the what? Present form of verb be, and together we call it be family. In this be family we have the present form is, am, are, and the past form was and were, right? And the present participle form being, and the past participle form been. Clear, students? And what else teacher does? What he does, students? He uses multiple slot substitution, my dear students. Multiple slots. Here mean that again different parts of speech. So sometimes he expects students to insert a subject, clear, and at times he expects students to insert an object, a noun, and at times he expects students to insert a verb, for example, right? I, for example, now he just shows picture and then say you, I help you, for example. Clear? For example, he shows picture, for example, a currency denomination. So, see, I give you money, for example. Is that clear? Or he shows a picture of a what? Bat. So, I bat, right? And again, a ball. So, children play with the ball. I hope you understand. So, what is it? Multiple slots are given students. And then, again, structure, I am, she is, of course, going to the post office. I am going to the post office. He is going to the post office, right? She is going to the post office. Now, she is going to the bank. Clear? So, of course, multiple slot substitution is there. It's also a drill. Then, again, we saw what? Transformation drill. What is transformation? Right? Transform something. Example sentence is what? I work hard. What is it? Affirmative sentence. I work hard. Now, if I remove this subject from here, so work hard. What is work hard now, students? Transformation. Transform to imperative. An order. Work hard. Right? Please work hard. Clear? So, I do not work hard. Fine? Negative. Do I work hard? Fine? So, transformation is there. Or, fine, I write a letter. Fine? A letter is written by me, for example. Is that clear? The light is switched off. I switch off the light is switched off by me, for example. So, what is it? Transformations. So, the teacher uses what? A transformation drill. So, I told you earlier, my dear students, there are lots of drills. So, the teacher gets tired. Remember that? Yeah? Teacher has to be very, very active because he is there. In fact, he leads these activities. Either they are chain drills, either they are repetition drills, or the question answer. So, what he does? He leads that. And then also teacher uses realia. He uses picture. Right? So, the teacher, in fact, shows a picture to a student and he expects a response from the students, and students give response because they have, done that dialogue many a times, and now they have learned those, of course, and they have even memorized those sentence structure, those grammatical patterns, and now whenever they see a picture, so unconsciously they make a sentence. They need not to think. Fine, and that has become their habit. That bank, so going to bank. Well, first office, I'm going to office, for example. And there is an office picture, and then there's a cross on that. I'm not going to office. Fine. So I hope you understand. Yes, students. So this is what another dialogue. Lots of drills are there, and then more practice. Words reviews the dialogue. So that dialogue is explored in the class for many times. Why? So that students would practice it more. Fine. And then again, what happens? Teacher can expand that dialogue by adding few lines. Why? I'm going to the post office. I need some tickets. Fine. Or I want to dispatch. Fine. What? A letter. Fine. I'm going to the courier. Fine. I have to send first my packet to say Lahore. Is that clear? So again, when one sentence is given, so that can be expanded. Fine, you can add relevant sentences with that. So again, drills the new lines and introduces new vocabulary, of course. Example, new vocabulary is courier. New vocabulary is, example, dispatch. Is that clear? Or packet, for example. So these new words are also what through drills students come to know. And then, of course, the teacher works on the mass and count nouns. What are the mass nouns and what are the count nouns? Is that clear? See, a little, a few, for example. So count nouns, you know that? count nouns, things that can be counted. And of course, see, so teacher works on that what are and how, through questions, through drills, right? See, the teacher of course means a little milk, for example, right? A few friends, a few apples, for example. So therefore, in this way the teacher works on that. And then what does the teacher do, students? He uses contrastive analysis. What is it? Correct the pronunciation. For example, ship and sheep. See, short vowel and long vowel. Kit and cat. Clear? Fine. Kit, K-I-T, short vowel. Cat, A sound. Clear? So teacher works on that. See, on contrastive analysis. Kit and cat, ship and sheep, for example. Clear? Meat and mat. Meat, again, short, long, meat and mat, A sound. So of course teacher works on that. And then at the end there is a writing also. Teacher writes the dialogue on the blackboard or on the whiteboard. Fine. Why? Again, once the teacher writes, the student, because now they have done that dialogue well, so they can easily, write that. And again, with the help of those sentences, students can add more to it. And not only they can add more to it, they can use that dialogue. And of course, some games are there. Supermarket alphabet game. What is it, by the way? The teacher, of course, the student goes to a market and, for example, he wants to buy apples, a few apples. And the student wants to buy bananas. And the student wants to buy what? Say, for example, chocolate. Clear? So, supermarket alphabet. A for apples, B for banana, C for chocolate, C for carrot, for example. Is that clear? So again, all these are practices, my dear students. See that? Either through supermarket game or through the dialogue on the board. There is a writing, or through a lot of drills. The point is that student would, practice those dialogues, those sentences, those sentence patterns in such a way that they need not to think. So spontaneously, they could use that sentence. And again, the teacher is not focusing only on one vocabulary item, of course. So he keeps on changing it, right? He keeps, at time he substitutes a subject, at time he substitutes an object, of course, and at time he substitutes the verb. So there is substitution, and it is single substitution, or we call it multiple substitution. All students, so this is what that we talk about the class that you have visited. Which class? Yes, audio-lingual method class. Well, students, so my dear students, see what we are here today. All right, we're talking about audio-lingual method. And again, there is a question. Somebody asked that again. What happens in audio-lingual method? Yes, it's a good question. So dear students, it is a method in which language is acquired. How language is acquired? Through imitation, repetition, and reinforcement. You want to take it down? Yes, write down if you want to. So language is acquired through how? Through imitation. What is imitation? Copying. You imitate, right? I-M-I-T-A-T-I. Verb is imitate, and then imitation. So language is acquired through imitation. One. Second, repetition. You saw in the class, lots of drills were there. Repetition. And then what else was there? Reinforcement, right? The teacher says, well, good, well done, good job. All right, students. So this was a brief introduction. And in the class, we also saw that when a student mispronounces a word, so again, right, the teacher helps the students, right, in correcting that pronunciation mistake. Well, students, so how the teacher helps the students in improving their pronunciation? When a student mispronounces a word, students, so what happens? Right, the teacher changes the rhythm of his voice. So that once he changes the rhythm of his voice, it means that there is something wrong. So that change of the rhythm helps the students to rethink, in fact. And of course in that there is help available from other students, and a lot of repetition is there. The students also improve their pronunciation, and they correct the pronunciation problems whenever they mispronounce a word, and the teacher in fact helps them realize it, and the student comes to know and he starts pronouncing that words correctly in fact. Well students, so let's come to the principles of this method. Of which method? ALM, principles of audio-lingual method. What are the principles? I hope you know what are the principles. I need not to tell you again. Fine. So what is the first principle? Right? The first principle is that language forms occur naturally within a context. So now once you know that you saw the class, you saw the classroom activities, so now it's very easy to in fact infer method principle. It's very easy to find out what is the thought behind it. Like you saw that a dialogue was there, so the language form occurs naturally within a context. Is that clear? So that's why in dialogue, of course, you see a different situation, you have to give a new expression, a new word to that. So that is what we saw in the dialogues that we saw earlier, that well, language occurs naturally in fact within a context. For example, there was a bank, and then we had a sentence with the post office, and then we changed with the bank and with the a playground or whatever. So again, this happens, and of course the natural process of language, that language occurs naturally. And this is the one principle, that when you select a dialogue and you change that dialogue accordingly by keeping in mind the situations, so it means that the principle behind is that language occurs through what? Occurs naturally within a context. And then of course we saw the class proceeding, that of course communication was there, but in target language. So what is the principle behind? Yeah, very simple. There is no room for native language or mother tongue. Fine. So again, so far if I just give you a view, in GTM we saw the use of mother tongue. In direct method, no, and again here no room for mother tongue. So again, because the focus is on communication, that students should be able to communicate in that language. So that's why no mother tongue. Second, another principle is what? To help students with a native speaker like model. This is important. And again, the dialogue is given, and the students are given practices, drills. Fine. Teacher work with the student, and that's why when native speakers speak, so they speak fluently. The fluency is there, right? So that's what when we people speak and what we think, and then we move on. So that's why if the students make it their habit, right, and then they'll be speaking like a native speaker. So this is of course the principle is that through drills, once they make their habit, through chain drills or different drills are there, the principle behind is that you see the students need to have a native speaker like model. Again, it's a process of habit formation. We saw that once you practice a sentence, a pattern continuously, and becomes your habit, and then you may not think, of course you speak that sentence because you know that well, whenever I talk about my routine, so I will use present simple, it becomes your habit. Similarly, when I will talk about universal truths, so you would use present simple tense. Why? Because through that practice, through those drills, it has become your habit. Yes, students? Clear? Are you with me? Good. Fine. So what is it? Which method, students? Audio-Lingual method. How many principles we talked about so far? Yeah. Language occurs naturally in a context. This is what? Yeah. Of course, when you change the context, then there should be another language item, another expression should be there. So that's we saw in the dialogue as well. And accordingly, you change the dialogue, of course, as per the situation. No mother tongue, fine, and then native speaker like model, fine, and of course the process of habit formation. Another principle, what is it? Right, it's very important to prevent learners from making errors. Is that clear? Only then they could have what? Proficiency. And the point is how we can achieve it. Well, students, so we're talking about that this principle is that what it's really important to prevent learners from making errors, in fact. So how can we do that? How can we achieve that? Yes, again, different drills are there. Once students repeat a sentence pattern, for many times, so then definitely that of course we can help students preventing from those errors. And then of course when there are errors, again because why we need to prevent that? Once the student of course commit an error, so what happens? It becomes their habit. Fine. So that's why even of course now the researchers say, theorists believe that we need not to provide wrong sentence pattern to our students. Like generally we see that in grammar translation method, sometimes the wrong sentences are given and the students are expected to correct those sentences. Fine. But what happens? Then students also internalize those wrong sentences as well. So here what we do, that researchers say that we need to provide correct sentences, right, correct patterns, so that students would internalize those patterns. And again, when errors occur, they should be immediately corrected by the teacher. Clear? So that may not become habit to the student. Fine. And of course, definitely when the dialogue is there and we practice a lot, so of course through this practice, errors of course definitely they can be corrected, in fact. Fine, students. So move on. Yes, what is it? Why are you down today, students? Huh? Why are you down? Were you busy with Facebook? Internet? Yeah? Okay, but mind you see, okay, give your time to social media as well. Yeah, but don't give much time to Facebook. Okay, it reminds me of a joke. A mother asks his son, क्या कहती है? Mother says, beta, yes, get married with a girl who would not use Facebook. उस लड़की से शादी करना जो Facebook जिसको ना आती हो. क्यों? कि घर पे और बहुत सारे काम करने के लिए होते हैं. And the beta says, मामा शायद मेरी शादी ना हो सके क्योंकि आप तो हर लड़की फेसबुक को इस्तेमाल करती है. Of course she knows it. All right, so dear students, the Facebook is there, the social media is there, but the point is, yeah, we need to give to your time to your studies, right? So not with the subject, but all subjects, right? Or whatever subjects you are studying in this course. And if you had a subject, of course, that you could not get good grades and you want to improve that subject, again you need to make a timetable and move on. So the purpose of language learning is to learn how to use the language to communicate. Again, that is the purpose, of course. This is the principle. Another principle is that the language learning purpose, that language, we learn language so that we can communicate. If you are unable to communicate, so that learning is useless. So the purpose is this. So accordingly, we need to, practice, right, speaking that language. We need to give drills to our students so that they would be fluent like native speakers. And again, we saw as far as the particular parts of speech, right, occupy particular slots in sentences. For that we saw there was multiple slot substitution, and there was single slot substitution. So again, through this substitutions practices, students come to know, right, about different parts of speech, where to insert them, in fact, right? This is, of course, principles are there. And again, whenever teacher appreciates the students, really, motivation is very important. When you say good, well done, really it helps the student. It motivates the students. And if you say very bad, very poor, sloppy work, it demotivates the student, right? So you're all good students, you're all doing good job, right? You have set your goals that you all want to be important part of the society. Clear? Fine? And for that you are putting your efforts. Keep on putting efforts. See, there is always room at the top, and I want to see you at the top. You have potential. You all can be at the top. Just start working. Fine? Mind you, there is no shortcut in life. If you want to be at the top, yes, there is always room, right? But you have to reach there. You have to strive. You have to work really hard to be there. Fine. So, similarly, this is what reinforcement for you, right? So in the class, what does the teacher do? He gives positive reinforcement, right? So if the student does something, does a good job, so, right. When students start speaking like a native speaker like proficiency, so definitely, of course, there should be, appreciation. Also, another principle is that students learn to respond both in verbal and non-verbal stimuli. The teacher only shows a picture, or he directs, how are you? I'm fine. How is he? How is she? How are they? What is it? So again, both verbal and non-verbal stimuli, and students respond. Fine? And then again, the patterns help students to form habit, which enable the students to use the pattern, of course, like going to, example, use of wood and all that. So these sentence patterns are given and they are used in the class in such a way that students start using them. Fine? Thus they know that expression, and even they know when to use, where to use, and they start using it. So again, what? It becomes their habit. Yes, overlearning is there, right? We saw different drills were there. In drills what happens? Students overlearn, right? Learn to answer automatically without stopping to think. Fine? No second thought comes. Where are you going? Going to park. Where are you going? I'm going to university. Fine? What are you doing in the evening? Yeah, I'm free, I'm at home. Right? So this is what? This becomes your habit. Fine? Yes, where are you on this weekend? Yeah, I'm at home. Or I'm going, fine, and of course, I'm going to, say, to watch a movie, for example. So this is what, when the teacher gives a lot of drill, that's why imitation, repetition, and reinforcement. So automatically, in fact, students learn and they, of course, overlearn. And once the students overlearn, then it becomes their habit, and then they would not think of giving you an expression because they have used that expression repeatedly, right? And it is there, and whenever you ask something, they would reply. Again, teacher act like an orchestra, right? Orchestra, right? A leader, of course, he directs, and the students work, and he acts an orchestra leader, conducting, guiding, and controlling the students' behavior and all that. Fine. So a teacher works as an orchestra leader, of course. Right? Another principle, students, what is it? Right. Should we? To acquire the structural patterns. Structural patterns. Vocabulary will learn. Yes, students will learn, in fact, vocabulary afterward. Sentence pattern, for example, I am going to post office. See? So, I am going to bank. I am going to what? A playground. Then he is going to. See? So in this pattern we see the going to pattern. Fine? And then vocabulary, once the student know that sentence, and once they repeat that sentence, once they practice using that sentence, then the teacher replaces the subject with different pronouns, teacher replaces the object with different nouns. Clear? So this shows the principle behind is that structural pattern has priority over the vocabulary items. And then again, students, well, learning of foreign language should be the same as the acquisition of native language. Like, in this method, the principle is that like your what? Native language, in fact. How did we acquire our native language? So, our point, what did we do? We listened a lot. We listen a lot, and that listening, of course, continuous listening, what happened? Yes, made us a proficient speaker of that language. So dear students, in fact, these are some principles of Go, that the major challenge of foreign language learning is what? Getting students to overcome the habit of their native language. Fine. Again, that is a challenge, of course. The student, of course, L1 always interferes. Fine. And this audio-lingual method, right, tries, of course, and successfully, in fact, does this job. The student would not think in their L1. And again, the language cannot be separated from culture. So culture is not only what? Literature and the art, but also the everyday behavior of the people who use target language. Literature is what? Reflection of life. It is not only that, of course, the literary works, but literature is also what we see, what we observe. So these are some points, dear students. Today in this lecture, what we talked about, you see, so first we reviewed our previous lecture, and then we talked about, went to a class where audio-lingual method was exploited, and we had a discussion on that. And then we talk about different principles of audio-lingual method. Is that clear? So inshallah, in our next lecture, we'll review these principles, and then we'll move on to techniques. Any queries? Any questions? I hope things are clear, right? Good. That's all. Thank you very much. See you inshallah in the next class. Goodbye.